So let me introduce you to these three. Between them, they're 103 years old. Okay, so you've got to work out who is what and how old they are. 103 years old. So just very briefly, let me show you who they are. Jocylyn McGregor. Jocylyn. There she is. So she's a multidisciplinary artist working primarily in multimedia installation, sculpture and performance. And she holds a BFA in Fine Arts from the Ruskin School of Fine Arts and an MFA in sculpture at the Slade School of Fine Arts. And basically she's won loads of awards as well. But I'll stop it there. We've got Alistair Debling, who makes films, photographs, performances, meals and installations. Through sustained engagement with a particular community, he likes to discover unlikely connections between things. What does a nuclear power station have in common with a disco ball? A dairy cow with a canonized saint? A gay bar with a wild elephant? That's Alistair. And then we've got Sophie Broadgate, who is a Cumbrian filmmaker working across narrative, documentary and artist film. Since receiving a late diagnosis of autism, Sophie has focused on making work around neurodivergent experiences. Sophie is also a producer at Full of Noises. Have I got all that right? Great, okay, yeah. Right. So we're just going to have a conversation about being a freelance artist in Cumbria and your own experiences and the opportunities, perhaps the challenges that have come your way as part of this experience. What's it like being a freelancer in Cumbria? Who wants to go first?
I think I grew up in Cumbria. Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Is that all right?
Yep.
Is that, yeah. I grew up in Cumbria, and I think like a lot of people that have been speaking, left, and then came back and left again, and came back and left again. So I think also I guess the feeling of being a freelancer in Cumbria is perhaps that there is a sort of lack of things to maybe aim for. And I remember so when I came back after a couple of times of leaving, I had sort of established my career as a freelancer elsewhere, or kind of elsewhere in the country, and that was. I felt then like, oh, okay, I've got like the foundation to come back, because it doesn't really matter about what's going on in Cumbria. Like, it's not really going to affect my career. So I came back, and I remember having these two assistants on a commission at the Wyndham Jetty, actually, and them saying, they were just starting out and they're from Cumbria, and they were talking about the sad thing was they were talking about the same issues that I had. Also when I was that age, this sort of like, oh, we want to stay, and there's something really integral to our practices, and there's something we're exploring in our practices that's really like ties us to conceptually to Cumbria, but those opportunities, where do we get them? And I had to be really, really honest and say, I think you're going to have to get them elsewhere and come back when you've got that foundation. And that was really sad that I had to give that advice.
And do you still think that now?
Yeah, maybe I do. I think the speakers today is brilliant, because I think we've maybe had similar challenges of conceptually you're tied to this area. Like when you go to and show elsewhere, like it's my kind of link to Cumbria or link to that landscape is always kind of picked out in how people talk about my work. Yeah. And and people are like, oh, you should immerse yourself in that environment to really pick that out, and you're like, I'm already in it, I am immersed. But I think that the sad thing is I don't want to be totally negative, because I think we may
I won't let you be, don't worry.
No. I think we are at a crossroads. At least we're having the conversations about what, those conversations weren't being had before. It's very much a
right. Alistair, you've got the microphone. Do you want to pick up from that and that?
Yeah, I'll say I'm new-ish to Cumbria. I've been here since 2022, and I've been fully freelance for the last year and a half, and have had actually a really good run of opportunities in Cumbria. That does still feel precarious, because you sort of think, well, I've worked with that place now, and they're not going to want to have me next year or the year after probably.
You were
Do
teaching here yesterday, weren't you, I think?
Yes, I've been working with Archene at the moment, and Zwiebelfish, who are here, and a project with Signal.
Is it always a sense of precariousness, though, as a freelancer?
I don't think that's specific to Cumbria. I will say from 2025, because I was at the big meet last year, and I thought, well, I'll keep track of this. I've seen in Cumbria 3 paid open call opportunities in 2025. One was about 600 quid at Florence, and then the 2 big residencies at Archene. Silence. That was the only open call that I saw that you could apply to that you weren't selected for. I've been lucky that a couple people in this room approached me about doing a project. That's been really great. But in terms of publicly available entry-level opportunities for 2025, that was really scary for me. I had my appendix removed in March, and I was 2 months without work. And I was just looking, and there was nothing to be applying for. And we think about families, and we're in our 30s, and that's the scary thing. There is no maternity leave for freelance. We've said maternity leave, but I'm assuming there wasn't like a monthly payment from Catalyst in that. And you resume the project once you've had the time off. So it is really precarious. I don't think that's necessarily specific to Cumbria, and I think I've seen progress since the last big meet in terms of the conversation and see it to be it. I'm hoping will be a great way to rally around.
So, the last big meet, come to you in a second, sorry. The last big meet, which was at the University of Cumbria back in November, I think last year, where you spoke. A lot of thinking, a lot of reaction from that meeting has developed into see it to be it to some extent, which I'm sure Kate might talk about a bit later on. So it's interesting that you hark back to that. All right, thank you, Alistair. Yeah. Sophie, how about you?
So I'm quite lucky that you guys have you've started off with some of the sort of the challenges, and then I get to be like, oh, well, here are some of the things that we've done. And I suppose picking up on some of the conversations that you guys were talking about and, the examples that Jocylyn gave is the artist community. I guess when there's a lack of opportunity, artist community is tighter, I suppose. And I guess that I also had a journey I left Cumbria when I was 18, moved back when I was 31. So like Jocylyn, I built up my career in Manchester. And then when I felt like I had that base that I'd built myself, I felt like I wanted to come back because I didn't really feel at home in Manchester. So I wanted to come home. But a lot of my work was still in Manchester and still elsewhere. But I think that a lot of the stuff that has been extra special here is because I had that sense of home. I've been able to make opportunities for ourselves. So the 3 of us have created opportunities not only for ourselves but for other artists. And I think that I'm always a fan of artist-led. And, a lot of the organisations that are here in West Cumbria, the south as well, south of Cumbria, are artist-led. And they were set up by artists who recognised a lack of opportunity. So I think that, that's essentially how we've kind of survived. But there is a truth to it that, like Alistair said, the statistics show that the majority of artists don't make a good salary from their art. So it's finding those opportunities as well to work within arts organizations, or it's the decision of what job are you going to do as well as your art, and a job that allows you to have the flexibility to continue making work. Because a lot of jobs, if you're an employee, you might not be able to leave for the right amount of time that you need to create work, particularly with your work. And I'm a filmmaker as well, and it takes a long time to make those pieces. And if you're sort of juggling lots of hats, it becomes quite tiring. So I think that, I could talk about this for weeks on end as well. Like you said, that there's so much depth to go into, so I can only kind of cover the surface. But
all right, okay, Alistair.
I'd say it's to bring up the positivity. The reason I love Cumbria and the reason I'm here and still making work here is I've worked with amazing people, not only at the supporting institutions that are commissioning projects, but I have a quite socially engaged practice, filmmaking, photography, etc., and work with the most amazing people and most amazing landscapes. I think that's probably what we can all agree on. That's what we love about working in Cumbria. And I have had a really, like, this next 6 months is really great. I'm really busy, which is like a huge plus. But the reality is it's 3 group exhibitions, 1 solo exhibition, and 2 performances in 6 months, all new work, all new commissions. And my artist fee for the next 6 months of income is £7,500. And that's I'm on track for a salary of 15,000 for the year, which makes me feel like I can't do this full time because I can't afford. I have to take on fewer arts opportunities because I don't have the time to do them all, because even if I'm doing it pretty much full time, the income isn't enough to pay bills and eat, never mind start a family or any of those.
So to play devil's advocate, do you feel you have the right that you shouldn't be in that position?
I think if you're working full time, you should be paid a living wage. Yes, Tom. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, but that's a decision. Do we think artists have a right to be full-time artists? If you think no, okay. If you think yes, then they should be able to, pay their bills. But,
okay.
Yeah.
Jocylyn, do you want to add something to that? I mean, I'm
Yeah.
particularly interested, I guess, as well in, you've touched upon it, Alistair, Cumbria has some unique characteristics. Some are positive, some are negative. Different people will see things in different ways. I'm interested in what you think Cumbria has to offer a freelance artist, as well as the clear challenges it has as well.
I think in terms of what Cumbria has to offer, it has the potential to offer loads more. So I think, like, for example, we've spoken quite a lot, is if there was more annual open calls. So if lots more arts organisations, and it can be a range from like 500 quid for emerging up to, 10 grand for sort of a mid-career, up to like 80 grand for a permanent public sculpture somewhere. And if kind of organisations offered those on an annual or biannual, between them as well, then actually you'd be then giving artists something to aim for. You would be like, okay, there's sort of oxygenation in the pond, as it were.
Yep.
So like staying here, you could be like, okay, I'm going to work towards that commission. I didn't get it this year, I'm going to go for it in 2 years' time or whatever. So I think Cumbria has loads to offer in that we've got loads of arts organisations.
At least 80 plus we put on the list last year.
Yeah.
Imagine if all of them, even if one was 500 quid, if all of them had an open call every single year, that's 80 opportunities. That's really exciting.
Okay, well, we'll open up the conversation in a second, see if there's any thoughts from the floor. Did you want to add anything, Sophie?
I suppose that, like, just to sort of come back to that, like, idea of leg up, because I'm here under 2 capacities of, like, I am a filmmaker, but I also work with Full of Noises as a assistant producer. And I think that, the reason that I am in the arts is because of the leg ups that I got early on.
Yeah.
And that was thanks to organisations like Signal that both me and Jocylyn used to work for. So when I was 14, there's no way that I would have gotten into film if I didn't have that support from Signal, because they were the only organisation within driving distance that I could use a camera, because I couldn't afford a camera. And so it's kind of like recognising the landscape that we're in that there is sort of a lack of resource, and there is, maybe less opportunities as, if you were living in Manchester, there's more stuff available, but recognising that and going, okay, so I have a camera, if anyone wants to borrow it, if anyone wants to have it, and just sort of like, because that's, again, coming back to artist networks. And so, like, there's so many organisations and artists like ourselves who are like in our 30s now, we might have resources that we can share. So I think I found that there is more of a culture of sharing in Cumbria, just because there is a lack of, facilities and like camera rental houses. So like all me and my filmmaking friends here, we just share gear and share knowledge. And I think that kind of like word of mouth that Jack was talking about is that, within artist networks, there's so much knowledge. And I think that, coming together like this is really amazing. It would be great to have more of this, and for the artists who are coming, like obviously we're paid to be here today, but more of these opportunities where if we're sharing all of this knowledge and we're giving all of our time to make sure that that's supported. And yeah, so more talking, more bringing the community together to have these conversations, and then making action points that then are monitored afterwards. And I guess that's probably what you guys are sort of trying to do with this.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to add to the conversation, who might run an organisation or might be a freelancer? Because part of the conversation today is about how do you, as an organisation, work with freelancers, and as well as just talking about freelancers themselves. Let's go over here. Katie. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, some really great points there. So I'm also a freelancer in my 30s, moved away for university, but have never worked outside of Cumbria, or never been based outside of Cumbria for work. And yeah, it's really hard to build that base. I was really interested in what you were saying about you should be able to make at least minimum wage if you're working full time. And I think the round of applause that got, everyone agrees that it should be at least minimum wage. I was talking to someone at a festival last weekend, and we both sort of shared our experience that we've found generally that fees tend to be lower in Cumbria than elsewhere in the country for this, like day rates, for example. And I just wondered whether that was something that any of you had experienced, and what do we do to combat that? Is it about educating people to advocate for ourselves? Is it about educating the organisations who are paying those fees? How do we fix that? Because we ought to be earning a living wage at least.
I've seen an improvement, I think, in Cumbria specifically, and generally over the last year in terms of day rates. And I think the Art Gene residencies that they've just advertised is the first time I've seen like an artist union day rate, like the full whack for an artist. So that's really positive that the conversation is moving that way. Emma points out you always underestimate how long it takes to make a piece of art. So even though we've said, well, it's 10 days and you're paid at this rate, how many late nights do you do? So in terms of getting that wage right, just look at the Structurally Fucked, it's called Structurally Fucked, the report, which said that artists generally get £2.60 an hour for their work, and it's even less for actual art making and exhibition making. Glasgow University published the median income for artists is £12,500 a year for their art, and that's down 47% since 2015. So this isn't just a Cumbria problem, it's a national problem. But yeah, I don't know how.
Yeah, I think just sort of, I'd love to pick up on that if that's all right. We're constantly asking this question in Full of Noises as well, and we actually, I'm not going to ramble on about this too long because I could go much deeper about this, but we have like the hierarchy of needs triangle on the wall. And we're thinking about like, if artists can't have that stability at the bottom of the triangle, because what artists are trying to do is at the top, it's self-actualization and creativity. And if because they will, artists are going to do that thing at the top because that's what they do. But if they don't have this base at the bottom, then they're going to burn out. They're going to have like cost to themselves, whether it's financial, emotional, etc. And so our responsibility as organisations is to make sure that we're checking in with ourselves, that we're giving all of those things. And I think because I produce with artists as well and are very like hands-on, and I suppose that like knowing that as an artist myself, I always create these really ambitious projects, and having a producer to work with within an organisation that can sort of check in on that and just make sure that you're not overstretching yourself. And if the project that we have agreed to do as the organisation is too ambitious for the money that they're being paid, what can we do to make sure that that isn't stretching the artists? Do we scale it down? Do we find extra funding? Do we find extra resources? So it's kind of, at FON we talk a lot about the ethics of what we're doing, and so I think it's again just coming together in these kind of conversations and people just saying, this is a problem I'm having, how can we solve it? And then I think
Okay.
but
All right. Let's have another voice from the crowd. Bob.
Hello, I'm Bob. Some of you may know me, some of you don't. I'm an artist, researcher and producer in West Cumbria. This is maybe not so much of a question, but I'm just going to drop this in. Might make myself unpopular. What's new? We're talking a lot about organisations and institutions, and there's a lot. And again, this is not specific to Cumbria. To reiterate what you're all saying, but there's an awful lot of public money, arts money going into organisations and institutions. Relatively, not as much money going directly to artists. Now, I work as an autonomous and kind of independent producer and researcher, and I am in support of artists, and I'm constantly having that conversation about pay artists more. The Catalyst idea is a great idea because it's a long-term residency, and I'm really interested in those the embeddedness and the long-term residencies. But to counter what Jack was saying earlier, I think there are gatekeepers, and they're in comfortable positions. And I understand why certain organisations and institutions, again, not specific to Cumbria, don't want to give up those positions, but ultimately we have to follow the money, and as artists and independent artists really should be encouraged to be, yes, to help be more self-sustaining and also support other artists. Artists supporting artists creates a healthy community. Rather than it being this kind of piecemeal, we go cap in hand, it's the wrong model and everyone knows it. So these conversations are being had and they need to be had. Thank you for your time.
I second that. I've got maybe a bit of a utopian view that might come across as way more radical than it needs to be. But I sort of feel a bit like if each director of an organisation earned the same as the total number of artist fees that year, that you would have this much more kind of a sort of tighter feedback loop. So you do see that in a lot of artist-led organisations where you would have, the artist, who's also a director, is quite often then feeding that back into the artist they're commissioning, and probably by the end of the year, kind of balancing the books a bit. But where you see a situation where essentially it's like gatekeepers, where most of the money spent on keeping the gates looking good, then we sort of have this loss, I feel like, in this creativity, because you're not investing in the culture, that you're sort of hemorrhaging the money out of culture, basically.
Okay, one more voice here.
Hi, it's partly just adding to the previous question, really. Lucy Burnett, writer and photographer based in Cockermouth. I've mainly supported myself. I've been in academia. Academia is in crisis, so I've gone from being freelance back in the academia, back freelance. And I think that just now is a particular moment, which is particularly hard for freelance artists. I read a piece which Kathleen Jamie wrote. So Kathleen Jamie, ex-Scotsmacher, so the Scottish Poet Laureate, who went from that position into being freelance again. And even Kathleen, one of the best known poets in Scotland, was saying, there's absolutely nothing out there as a freelancer. So if, in her position, if she can't get work, how are those young artists actually going to find work? And I think that a few years ago, there was a lot of talk about art's going to be in crisis. I think arts organisations have survived. They're doing okay. And she was saying, and I would second it, the layer which is actually really struggling are the freelancers, because the organisations don't have the money to pass that on down. So I guess my question is, in France, actually, artists do get a basic wage. If you're a successful enough artist, you get a stipend so that you can survive. But how do we, as freelance artists, actually survive this period and step on beyond it?
Thank you very much. And before we get perhaps an answer to that question, Nick, who runs Intro in Carlisle.
Hi, yeah. Might not be the most artistically pure contribution, but the reference was made to the funding you'd had from Enterprise Cumbria earlier, and I just wondered what the level of conversation is between the issue that we're talking about here and the business community, and is there a dialogue there. I say this, I run a business, we use artists in our business. So the artwork for Cumbria Community Foundation's Winter Warmth Appeal is created by an artist. A client of ours, Fibrous Broadband, are commissioning poetry to illustrate their project they're doing about rural economy. And these are just examples from my thing. And I would imagine a lot of other businesses who aren't perhaps naturally linked to the artistic world as we might be would struggle with that, but their businesses would actually be better for engaging with the artistic community. And I wondered if you'd had that funding, is there some conversation that goes alongside that? I mean, how many boring council consultations can you do before you actually think it'd be a lot better if some of you guys were doing it and you'd get more people involved?
It's a very good point that you asked there. One final contribution from the floor, then I'll ask for one final thought from the three of you, and then Maddie's going to give us a pearl of wisdom as well.
I just wanted to finish with something positive, really. I'm a Barovian artist, whatever that means, I don't know still. I'm still working it out. I was doing acting, lost all my work and came back to Barrow in COVID. You can make absolutely fantastic work without hardly any money. And if you've got something really passionate to do, then do it. I wanted to, when I moved back to Barrow in COVID, we were getting so much negative press about this town. And I felt really isolated. I hadn't lived here all my life. I left to go and do the arts because there wasn't anything here at the time. And Barrow Full gave me £500. I got my mate to buy a camera because I did ask organisations in the town to help me. I didn't know how to make a film. Nobody got back, so I thought, fuck it, I'm going to do it myself. And I did make something called Our Barrow Town. Check it out. But I just don't want this to deter young people. I'm in my 40s now, so I'm used to people rejecting me. But I just don't want young people to be deterred from setting out what they want to do artistically, because I think this world needs it more than anything. So good luck.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. All right. One final thought from the three of you, combined age of 100 and whatever.
I guess just picking up on the last point, like, yeah, absolutely don't want to deter anyone from getting into the arts. And I think that just to have like an open invite, like if anybody wants to talk to me, I'm a filmmaker, artist, producer at Full of Noises. And at Full of Noises, we like to try and like, conversations are part of the work, and having people round for a cup of tea is part of the work, and just hearing what you want to do. You know, I think that Andrew Deacon, who he's now left Full of Noises, but he set up a legacy there that is about like, just come in and have a chat. And so we've continued that after Andrew. And yeah, so if anyone wants to get in touch with me, then come and talk to me. I'll give you my email, give you everyone's emails at FON. And yeah, just come in and have a chat. And I think that, yeah, that's kind of my last thought is that, yeah, I really love, as well as making art, I love to support people, and I love to find ways to find the resources that maybe you're not aware of, like especially if you're new to the area, or maybe like we spoke about, like you don't feel like you've got permission to ask for those things, then find somebody in the community who has links and will get those things for you. And so yeah, just get producers that'll get everything for you, basically.
I guess like my final thought, and to pick up on you, like I really hope this is not negative, because actually if we do the things that we've spoken about today, then actually by the time that new generation sort of start banging on the door, we're ready for them. So I think like I really want to be that person that in like 10 years time is like, they didn't have it as hard as I had it, because that means we won, right? That means we sort of really pushed forward with culture. But I think we take those practical steps. I don't think it would need to cost more money. I think we just need to have more conversations, and we need to gather those resources and just use them more effectively.
If every arts organisation in Cumbria looked at their budget lines and just had one line that was an open call for before the next big meet, how amazing would that be? How many artworks would be made? How many artists would be supported? So if that could be a challenge to have, 80 on the See It to Be It website opportunity in the next year. That would be incredible. And you're all there. Everyone, the infrastructure's there. And as you say, even if it's 500 quid, for me, that's the difference between a really crap month and a really great month. That extra small commission that you get, as long as they don't ask you to do 3 months' work off of 500 quid. So yeah, that's the challenge, and that would be amazing. Yeah, you have to be it in order for people to see it, in order for them to be it.
Okay.
Which Art Gene clearly is. You might have a reflection.
Yeah. So, artist-led. So I am a freelance artist still. So as artist-led, I would say, think differently, which is something that David Haley said earlier, who's one of our trustees and an amazing artist, okay, and worked with us many times. But also, I think in a vacuum, that's how we made Art Gene, Stuart Bastick and myself, both visual artists. We created the work for ourselves. And I think that one of the amazing things that we can do in Cumbria is, if there isn't the opportunity, you can try and make that opportunity yourself. And as said here earlier by some great young minds, nearly all the organisations I know, and certainly Art Gene, any email that I get from anybody, I respond to. And quite often, residencies and other opportunities are developed with those artists that I speak to through email, even bringing people from abroad. So if you don't ask, you perhaps don't get. Don't assume you're going to get just because you ask, but you are actually out there. And I would also say apply for everything, because of those hundreds of people that applied for the Catalyst opportunity, all their work was looked at, and they are all in our heads. And just to say that in May, because of that, in May we're having a very large exhibition here of artists, visual artists who applied to Catalyst, and it's going to be a curated exhibition. So do come and look at that, and that's a way of trying to continue that sort of opportunity for people. Not many pills of wisdom, but just my thoughts there.
Sophie.
Jocylyn, yeah, Jocylyn.
Thanks, Jocylyn.